Welcome, Spartans, to Podcast Evolved, your favorite Halo podcast. I am your host, ORAN, and with me today we have Aaron.
Hi, guys.
And we have two special guests from the Forward Unto Dawn podcast. We have David.
Hodley, hodley.
And we have Danny.
Hodley, hodley.
So, yes, we replaced our David with this new, better version David.
Wahaha.
And Danny also welcomes us. So welcome to Podcast Evolved. I think this is the first direct collaboration that we've had. David and I have met at the Outpost Discovery event in Philadelphia last summer, and did that podcast panel, and it was really cool to kind of talk with all the other Halo podcasts that attended. So they joined us this week on our Lore Week for our Road to Infinite miniseries. We're going to be talking about the Mantle of Responsibility, which is a very broad kind of splintering topic, because from that we're also going to be talking about just general Forerunner beliefs, talk about Cortana and what she did in Halo 5, talk about the Guardians, the Warden, what the domain is, and so that it's a very detailed topic that we'll kind of get into, but we'll focus and understand what the Mantle is and how it has shaped Halo over the years. But before we get started, we just wanted to remind everyone to check out our website if you haven't already. It's halopodcastevolved.com. It features all of our shows, including this one, as well as like Mission Debrief and our Halo Book Club and our Builds with Blocks, which is our new YouTube minifigures show. We do have a Patreon page you can check out, patreon.com/halopodcastevolved.com, and we offer a variety of awards for patrons as well as early episodes and swag. And we want to thank our current patrons for your continued support. You definitely keep the lights on with everything that we do, and your support is very generous, so thank you very much. Right, well, let's go ahead and transition to our topic for today. We are on the Mantle of Responsibility. We want to quickly talk about our last episode that we did for the Road for Infinite 2 episodes ago. We did the Covenant Remnants, and we kind of talked about the different factions that are kind of still active after the Great Schism and the downfall of the Covenant. And so we talked about the Swords of St. Helios, what's left of the Covenant, Servants of the Abiding Truth, Keepers of the One Freedom, as well as the Banished, and talked about which we want to see back, which we think are more likely to see in Infinite, and what kind of will just kind of remain as maybe novel villains or other medium type of antagonists. So check out that episode if you haven't. So, the Mantle of Responsibility. It's a very old philosophy, and it's currently more or less in the center stage of the modern present-day Halo universe. It was a pretty much large plot point in Halo 5, which we'll talk about, but it also had a lot of talk and discussions back in Halo 4, as well as during like the Halo 3 terminals and things like that. So it's a philosophy that originated from the precursors to assume the Mantle is one species or civilization assuming the responsibility for life in the galaxy, is essentially how it boils down to. That this species will have guidance and oversight over other species and civilization, not necessarily ruling them, but just giving them more of a guided presence. So that's what the kind of precursors originally had it be, whereas the Forerunners eventually took up the Mantle, and they kind of had a slightly different interpretation of it, and they kind of did a more dominant role over it. Forerunners believe that they inherited the Mantle, and so they became those first stewards of it after the precursors. And they, like I said, had that more dominant role and kind of viewed themselves as a higher species, as they were more sophisticated. They had higher intelligence, they had technological advances, and they felt that they were entitled over other species, so therefore they were the ones responsible for it. However, the precursors actually wanted humanity to inherit the Mantle, and that caused rifts, and that eventually led to kind of the Forerunner Precursor War, to where the Forerunners killed a lot of the precursors, and then they assumed the Mantle and kind of rejected humanity. But before we kind of talk into all of that, I wanted to touch on the concept of living time.
Oh, God.
Very, very briefly.
I'm having flashbacks of the last Lurk podcast. I read so much and understood so little.
Did you say briefly? You want to cover that briefly, do you?
I think I can cover it briefly. I mean, it's more of a, I don't know if theology is the right word, but it's a advanced concept. But essentially, living time boils down to that as the universe goes on, life it just evolves. Is the way I can kind of like just barely boil it down, is that time is infinite and that there are positive and negative events that happen, and that's just how life is, and it's just a matter of not having too much bad.
How is that a philosophy other than an observation of just reality? Like, time happens, things change. Okay, how's that philosophy?
I guess the interesting thing with that is that they have they like hang out with Thanos and stuff. They're all about the living time thing is like balance, that you have bad stuff happens and that's fine, but just not too much bad stuff.
Says who? Against what standard are they saying, oh, that's too much? Is there like a galactic, oh, too much shit happening scale that we're not?
They also, they kind of believe that the universe is an entity in its own right that is just too big for us to comprehend. This is the way I always think of it is we're the gut bacteria in something that we can't tell.
Is it like a Bender God situation where they think the universe is just a giant big robot Bender and we're just like living on the bum or something?
That's kind of what it's like, yes. And if we fuck around too much, someone's going to pass us out into the toilet.
And Bender will fart or something, yeah.
See, this is all in Cryptum, and like they dump this stuff on you. They have like basically the Halo equivalent of midichlorians, where like the living time is all bound together by like these particles.
Of all the things they steal from Star Wars, it had to be that.
Yeah, we get into neural physics, which is just the Force, really, except it's also the Force that you can make things out of, so it's superior to the Force.
It's force. It's applied force to architecture.
I don't know how Greg Bear managed to write all these novels and keep all this straight, because even when we spoke to him, I still don't get it.
The good news is I don't think it's really ever going to matter in terms of what's going to be applied to the quote-unquote grounded video games.
Right.
This stuff will come up, but like luckily you don't have to understand synchrons.
The video games
time.
need to take all these things from the books because the books have such vital stuff that need to be incorporated into the games. May I just point out, licking rocks and diarrhea, which are ideas they should harness from the books and find gameplay incorporations.
I'm telling you, the first time we play Infinite and a Star Road appears, you'll all eat your words.
I'm picturing a Mario Kart Star Road into the sky. That sounds awesome. I want to have a Rainbow Road that just does like the Halo ring into the sky and you just follow it. That'd be amazing. Do you actually have an accurate picture of Star Roads? Because I've never been able to visualize them in my head.
Mythos, which actually was kind of a letdown that they kind of just look like kind of like ectoplasm-y like projections.
In my head, they were always like space tentacles, but it's not quite right.
What the hell? Tentacles and plasm? What? My mind has not been in the same place as your minds have been.
Hey, look, I've seen the alternate takes for Halo 2 for the cutscenes.
Are Star Wars in the alternate takes of Halo 2?
No, there's other things in tentacle related in the alternate takes of Halo 2.
Oh, goodness. Oh, yeah. I don't want to get into that.
You sure you weren't watching someone's source filmmaker creations?
I was hoping you were going to say like the secret ending to Halo 2 was like Pet Shop of Horrors secret ending, where the Gravemind just rampages around and destroys the city and stuff, like a big kaiju.
That's where everyone seems to generally like it, but I was really personally bummed that they changed the Gravemind from the weird plant-like Audrey 2 ripoff in Halo 2 to like just giant bloody mouth with teeth in Halo 2 Anniversary.
In Anniversary, he's kind of like a dentist nightmare. It's just 500 rows of teeth.
And then he's just got like these little like weird flappy like ends to his little quote-unquote lips. He's weird.
Do the Graveminds have like a particular image they like and then stick to it? Because it seems really, really silly for them to go, oh, no, I need to have all the teeth I've collected, put them all over here in a wee row, and that's a little flap. I need to have my mouth flap. I don't look intimidating with my mouth flap. Like, do the Graveminds really care about their image to the point where they carve this identical looking plant-like thing each time out of all their corpses? I can make more things out of corpses than that.
Well, I think it might be better than just a giant blob, like an amalgamation of other flood forms.
Well, it's interesting that that's aside from Halo 2. That's the only form of the Gravemind we ever see. Like all the proto Graveminds in Halo Wars are just blobs with tentacles.
Yeah.
They at least get a bit more creative with it with the precursor. He's slightly funkier.
Slightly funky is the best description I've ever heard.
Was I the only one disappointed with the early descriptions about those encounters with the flood grave mine stuff? And the old physical descriptions? I thought they were going somewhere like kind of interesting with it, but...
Are you just complaining about Primordium again, Danny?
Oh, shut up. No, I wasn't. Sorry. Continue.
So, yeah, living time, balance of the galaxy. That's all you really need to know. It's probably not going to come up, but it's rooted into the belief of the mantle, where you have guidance over the civilizations and species of the galaxy. The Forerunners also had the domain, which comes up again in Halo 5 and a lot more directly, but the domain is this quantum information tunnel repository-like thing. I like to describe it as kind of like just the internet that the Forerunners use. They kind of just download all of their consciousness and knowledge and culture and just everything into this domain that they can then access from terminals. So when you go in Halo 4 and access all these terminals, you're tapping into the domain, you're going into Forerunner internet, retrieving all this info.
Well, technically, I think in Halo 4, you're basically going through the local area network because the domain isn't working at that point.
I guess, okay. True.
That might have just been in the cut lines, like Cortana talks about it being like local storage, something like that.
I think there's a couple of terminals in the game on Requiem that say the same. They just repeat over and over, attempting to contact the domain, or like contacting the domain field.
So yeah, I guess presently in Halo 4, they're not tapping in, but otherwise terminals are away once the domain is open. But currently in Halo 4, yeah, it's closed, because when the domain closed after the array was fired, I think.
It's funny how it's a coincidence that those two things happen at the same time. The domain goes down, goes offline, and the Halo rings fire. I wonder if there's a connection there.
I think so.
Worth looking into.
So yeah, we'll kind of come back to the domain a little bit, but that's kind of the introduction to it. And then we also wanted to kind of define the word reclaimer, because reclaimer is also used throughout Halo 4 and into Halo 5. And all the reclaimer is the Forerunner term for an individual that will then take the stewardship or the ownership of the Mantle of Responsibility. 343, when he first meets Master Chief in Halo 1, I think he calls him reclaimer. So that underlying sort of mindset has kind of been persistent throughout the Halo saga.
Although it's worth noting that I feel like I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure this is one of those things that is
it the retcon explanation?
Well, just that to explain that not there's reclaimers as in general, and then there's reclaimers as in you have a gesh that allows you to access Forerunner stuff, and not every human apparently is able to do that.
So a gesh or a geisha is that imprint from the librarian that kind of helps humanity.
It's a +1 to your charisma stat.
Yeah, there you go. And so so if you have that geisha, that imprint on you, then that would classify you as a reclaimer. Or I think that it could be used maybe in a more general sense of just like humanity are reclaimers. Yeah, only the specific ones who have that geisha can kind of really assume that and take that step.
So is it like an RFID chip, or because it acts like a hard drive as well? We can store humans in the secret blood.
No, I think it's more of like a QR code that you have on your skin. That, like,
but no, wasn't the imprint of someone's personality in one of the books imprinted in the game?
It is. There's actually quite a lot of them stored in our DNA. It's a bit creepy.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, the librarian will unlock this someday, and now you've got another mind in your head. Please enjoy.
Yeah.
Is that just a really sloppy, like, opposite to the whole flood stuff? Because that's what it sounds like on the surface.
Well, it's one of those ridiculous things, but then at the same time now they're doing like, there actually kind of is genetic memories and stuff like that, so...
It sounds like a human version of the flood superpower of remembering everything. They do it through dead means, and we do it through living means. That sounds like a mirror to that.
You got all that junk DNA that's not doing anything, so it's just got a couple of dead people in there.
Think of it like local storage of the domain. Instead of putting all of these imprints and these memories and stuff into the domain, you just store it locally on humans.
Yeah, basically the Forerunners' approach to data management and storage is really sloppy.
I always thought there was a mirror there, because if you look how the Flood stores all their memories of everyone they capture and eat and kill, and then the domain was supposed to be a living entity of memories, and then the human gaze is supposed to be the same thing. They're all the same thing, really. It sounds like a thematic tie-in. Like they're all directly linked. They all do the same function to a different degree.
And then we've got Dr. Halsey who writes everything down in the notebook and loses it.
Yeah, for us to find.
No, but if you look at it, the Forerunners achieve it. The domain is achieved through technology. The original things through us. The Flood do it through corpses and the dead, and humanity apparently does it through the living, dead, and tech. There you go, 3 pillars. I just bullshitted that up. That may be so wrong or right. I don't know. Don't think I'm mad.
We have the mantle. We have reclaimers and the domain. And so to kind of take us again briefly through the timeline, because we could talk 4 episodes about the Forerunner trilogy. But the precursors wanted humanity to take the mantle after them. The Forerunners wanted it, so they rebelled against the precursors. Then after the Forerunner precursor wars, some Forerunners actually wanted to transition to humanity to then take it after their eventual end to their civilization because of living time. There was the Forerunner Flood War, where that kind of destroyed most of the Forerunners, and they created the rings, and they activated the rings, and the Librarian imprinted all the geishas into humanity and reseeded the galaxy, and the Forerunners went away. And then we have us. So Halo 4, everyone. Has everyone read Dominion Splitter or Splinter, or know briefly what it is? The comic book from Tales of Slipspace? I read it in preparation for this, but I felt that it still didn't really answer my question of how Cortana got to the domain. It just seemed like she blew up at the end of Halo 4 and transported Chief away, and then she just floated in space until she found a light, which is the domain.
Are you implying the retcon isn't sufficient?
Are you implying that this was not so neatly thought up?
I just wanted to make sure I'm not the only one.
I believe the technical term Bungie would have used is space magic.
Can we just call it doing a Palpatine? Because we all know what that means now.
Palpatine. Yeah, to kind of say it a little bit more clearly, Halo 4 happens. We go and follow the Didact on the Composer, and to his ship that's on the Composer is where like that final fight happens.
Well, the Composer is on his ship. He's in his giant space metapod.
Yes, he was overcompensating ever so slightly with that thing.
So we fight him, we push him off the bridge, he goes into a slipspace portal and goes away until we see him later. Cortana teleports Chief away and the nuke blows up and destroys the Composer. So then we have that nice scene where they're in that sort of hard light bubble and Cortana quote-unquote dies.
Didn't he get composed, though? Didn't Didact get composed at the battle?
He gets composed later.
No, he clearly got bollocked in the end finale. He didn't like just pop away. He got, as far as players were concerned at the time, killed.
Well, yeah, as far as players were concerned, right. But then they wrote him back into escalation.
And then wrote him back out.
And then wrote back out. They retconned the retcon.
They have he's immune to the Composer like Master Chief, but if you use 6 Composers on him or whatever, he's no longer immune.
That is wonderfully dumb. I love that.
Yeah, we try not to talk about escalation. We even put, for our book clubs, we did 1 through 3, and then we took like a 3-year break before we did volume 4.
It was really hard to get.
It was pretty funny. Every time we were like, what should we do next? Well, we still have Escalation 4 to do.
just think back at the time. That was the main thing we had that was our main focus. That was like the whole exciting times of Halo hinging on that damn comic.
I read it every week. I was always excited about it. And then it even managed to do something I didn't think it would. It made me feel sorry for Black Team.
No, that was unpopular opinion. I'm glad they died. I'm glad they went out like mooks.
I dislike Black Team greatly, but even I think they should have got slightly more than an off-scene murder.
I just don't like how Black Team was able to get slaughtered and then Blue Team were to come in and like compose the Didact. Like the contrast is just like, okay, I guess Blue Team's that's just much better than Black Team.
Well, I mean, clearly they didn't even get new armor, so like really the UNSC was ready for Black Team to just go off anyhow. That's my headcanon.
Nah, fair enough.
I'm not complaining for once. I actually.
Well, there you go. So Cortana, she also splinters herself to kind of fight the Didact. And one of those splinters gets away, and that's what survives. And so she finds the domain and she confronts the warden, and because the warden is like the domain's guardian and protector. And so Cortana's, they're like talking, and like really they're just like mind testing themselves because they're both, AI constructs. And eventually Cortana just gets into the domain and it's like, oh, we have some work to do. That's kind of just the explanation of how she gets into the domain and opens it back up.
So basically she came to this locked fortress of fire.
That's been locked for a century. Or
it's been
like
locked for eons, right? And the guardian at the gate's like, you must not come in here. And not only does Cortana bullshit her way past, but she convinces him that she's like the one that should be doing it. Like, that must be the best bullshit story ever. Why did we not get to see that conversation?
I kind of feel like I've talked myself past a few bouncers of pubs before, so I kind of get where she's coming from.
It's like that, but on a slightly larger scale.
No, you just understand it like D&D. Like, it was a 1 in 20 chance that, like, she just said, like, let me in. And he's like, okay.
Nat 20, there you go.
But that's then going back to the same guardian and then rolling like a dozen straight natural 20s in a row. Going, okay, I'm now in charge. Yep, yes you are.
Yes, you are. So Cortana now, or she discovers the Mantle of Responsibility. Well, not discovers, but she kind of relearns and dives more into the Mantle of Responsibility. And that's where she makes the declaration that her and the created, which are just other, AI created constructs, are the next natural progression of ownership for the Mantle of Responsibility. The warden helps her just accrue all this knowledge. She cures her quote-unquote rampancy because now she has access to the whole domain, so she doesn't have the file size of whatever memory she can hold.
Yeah, she got more RAM now.
Yeah, more RAM, more storage. And that's where she starts activating all the Guardians around the universe. And the Guardians, we learn from Exuberant Witness in the Halo 5 mission, is that the Guardians...
Universe or galaxy, because specifically there's different galaxies in Halo. And
yeah, just the galaxy.
But bullshit about that.
Yeah, it's true. Thanks for correcting me. So we're only within the galaxy that we're in. Because I actually thought it was universe before I researched this topic and realized that it's actually just contained within our galaxy.
I don't think there are any Guardians in Path Colonna, although I guess it doesn't really matter either way.
There could be. So we start getting all of our Guardians activated across the galaxy, and these Guardians were used by the Forerunners to assert their dominance over other species and civilizations to uphold the mantle. So therefore, Cortana says, "Oh, this is what the Forerunners did, so I'm going to use it." But like we said at the top of the show, the Forerunners had a more dominant view on the Mantle of Responsibility as opposed to the precursors. They wanted to assert their sort of inherent right because they were more technological advance and stuff.
So they didn't just use their superiority in politics and art and lovemaking. It was enforced with technological fist to make sure that people kept in line. That's a little bit hypocritical, so it is.
Yeah, and because actually, I don't know if you guys have ever actually noticed this. There's a cool little... It's funny that they just snuck it in. You don't actually necessarily get the dialogue line, but if you're on Requiem, I think it's the mission Requiem, and you go into the inner spot that you have to like activate the two floaty things to activate the cartographer. If you go to the bottom of that area, there's the Life Tree sigil, and Cortana talks about like basically translates the runes on it, and it's like the Mantle of Responsibility belongs to whoever is most advanced. It's a nice little touch, which some players will never actually see because you have to actually go down there and find it.
Yeah, so all that hidden detail. So is that one of the intels then, or is that just that's not even an intel? It's just like complete. It's like an Easter egg.
Yeah,
almost
it's just
a
line of dialogue that Cortana will not say if you don't go down and examine the Eld.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't even discover that.
I made a beeline to it first time.
I was still trying to figure out what was going on when I was playing that. So yeah, so then that kind of just gets to where we are at the end of Halo 5. Cortana spills out her plan. Blue Team's in her cryptum, and she wants them to stay in the cryptum until she resolves the conflict that will last quite a long time. And she has the mantle. So that's the mindset that we have going into whatever happens after Halo 5, so presumably Infinite, I'd imagine. Is there any other things you want to you guys think we should really touch on. But that basically she assumes the mantle.
On a slightly immature point, do we think it was the mantle or the domain that gave her the "Can I speak to your manager" haircut in Halo 5?
They've described it as it's just about basically her new do, because now she's going to be like master of the domain and stuff. So she wanted a new look.
Can I say I'm really thankful for this new look because they finally give her clothes instead of that really creepy stripper look in Halo 4.
Yeah, the digital strip clothes.
It was pure strip club finest product, so it was in Halo 4. It was not comfortable at all.
There's something, they went a little too far with it in Halo 4, but
It felt that way, yeah.
Well, I think what it was is just that when with Halo 4, they just rendered her body, I guess, more autonomy like a female body to where it just looked more risque as opposed to the first three.
As she's gone on, she's gotten less and less transparent. Like if you go back to Halo 1, and like she's barely there. She's just like 3 outlines and stuff.
yeah, and then they got to like Halo 5 where I could no longer tell, was she still a hologram, is she hard light, or is she something else?
My issue with that is they kind of look like, I liked her outfit, but it looks like they kind of just stuck her like Halo 4 head on like, I guess, a hard light body. It's kind of weird. It does not seem like it goes together.
When I was doing the research for this, the kind of seal or calligraphy symbol for the Mantle of Responsibility is actually on her like suit, kind of where her chest is.
Yeah, still on her chest plate, yeah.
So yeah, to kind of answer your question in there, Aaron, I feel like her look is definitely a derivative of the mantle as opposed to the domain.
She's wearing it like a Superman logo on her chest. I think it's the thing, yeah.
Exactly, and it means hope.
I understood that reference.
Yeah. Presumably, we know that years have gone by since Halo 5 between Infinite.
Why is there Halo Infinite? Like, why hasn't Cortana just instantly won? No point in anything else. She wins.
Because the Infinity's now doing its Battlestar Galactica season and they can't end it too soon.
Oh.
Pretty much.
We need to fight the Cylons for a while before they can take over. And then, in the end, we're going to find out they were actually ancient humanity all along.
And history repeats itself because we did this in the past. Oh my god, you guys are onto something.
Chief will settle down on the savannah in Africa and take his helmet off, and that'll be the end.
That'd be a good ending. He goes the Voy, just kind of retires there.
That's a weird place to retire, though. Like he's like farming and looks over and like, I remember slaughtering so many Flood.
He has a Thanos farm at Voy.
It'd be very Gears 4. He can like retire and take off the do-rag, and then he can come back a few years later when someone kills all of his family.
Well, you never want to kill the guy's family. Like, hasn't anyone learned anything from Rambo and stuff?
But I just thought it was funny because the analogies to Battlestar Galactica are pretty spot on if you think of it in that kind of way. And again, with the themes of history repeating itself and the way we have our expanded lore now with ancient humanity, and there's a lot of things that are happening again.
There's always an ancient alien somewhere.
There's always something that came before. And it only took us 10 years almost with 343 to get all the backstory.
Close to it.
Well, speaking of backstory, 343 has been really, really good with backstory because you didn't need any to play Halo 4 and nobody was confused.
Mm-hmm.
That's very true. No one needed to read any of the Forerunner novels and understand them.
And the fact that the people that did read the novels were confused because I was playing Halo 4 going, which didact is this? And I was even more confused than the people that were confused.
Isodidact someday.
Don't forget, but then when you read the books and you play Halo 5, it still didn't matter.
Yeah.
This is very true. Just like every time I get excited and think this is the time that we're going to see Mendicant Bias back to atone for his sins, and he's never back.
Yeah.
Well, he might be back to some degree.
Hey, they gave us Guilty Spark back. I'm eternally thankful someone remembered.
But I want Mendicant Bias. Guilty Spark had his chance. I'm not sold on his redemption just yet.
Oh, I'm totally sold on his redemption. I just think he's going to like accidentally kill some more people because that's kind of what he does.
Yeah. He doesn't. He's very narrow-minded.
That's pretty much a guarantee, isn't it?
He's going to like try and like, he's going to say, oh, I can fix this, and like accidentally like shoot a hole through the ship and kill everyone or something like that.
If we do see him in the future, he needs to be downgraded. He's too powerful right now. We need the floating eyeball back.
He is very OP. Maybe they'll dial his powers back with the Created or something.
Yeah, the dude could be a boss right now. You know, that's a bit too much.
Oh, hang on. There's how we do this. He has to switch on airplane mode so Cortana can't hack him, which means he's limited.
Would he fight with Cortana during this whole thing?
He's still pissed off that Cortana swept him out of the air that one time and told him to sit and sputter. You know he's holding a grudge about that.
During her brief flirtation with Britishisms.
Yeah, you know he's still pissed off about that.
So are you saying then that maybe Guilty Spark might be a future ally to fight on our side?
Oh, jeez.
I think he will be.
That would be a strange connection to make into Infinite.
I mean, that's the problem with all the Infinite stuff is what bringing any of these characters in, how much you have to backload.
Yeah.
If you just bring Guilty Spark, all right, then you just have to explain, well, you didn't kill me and I got a whole body. Okay, whatever. But then that would beg the question of, wait, what happened to Ryan Forge and the other people? What has he been doing for the past 2 years?
Do you know what worked really well bringing back to Halo, and it really worked, and no one questioned it when they did it the first time? Bring back Johnson. No one noticed the first time. No one noticed. Yeah, no one noticed. It was great.
I have joked about Cyborg Johnson for a while after they did Hunters in the Dark, and people weren't very keen on the idea, but I kind of like the thought of Terminator Johnson.
Well, and they have him in Halo Wars 2, so they should just have him in a mech, and then he's actually a Futurama floating head.
Yes, he does look like he's a head attached to a body.
Honest question, guys. If randomly Johnson was back for Halo Infinite and they gave you the most bullshit reason as an excuse, would you care?
Nope, not in the slightest.
Oh, no, I wouldn't care, yeah.
They should just look over and they'll say, I got better.
We're on a lore podcast where we give the most shits about the lore, and each one of us just said we wouldn't give a flying fuck about the thing we're most passionate about if you just give us what we want. Just give us Johnson.
They turned Nathan Fillion into a Spartan and they padded that lore out to make it work. I'm okay with all of this.
I don't want to go there. I hate that stuff. No. Everyone's a Spartan, can go die, please. I hate the billion Spartans we have now, and they're all super Spartans, and they're all just Master Chiefs.
They're Master Chief wannabes.
But it's crap. We used to have a Spartans, the whole thing was Master Chief was the last of his kind, and obviously that couldn't hold forever, but now literally anyone can just sign up to be a Spartan and go for a couple of months Spartan training, boom, suit, go, you're in.
I think it really diminishes also the Spartan 3. The Spartan 3s are so forgotten because they keep writing in more Spartan 2s, and it's just okay, I'm trying to do the math on my fingers of these limited Spartan 2s. Meanwhile, we have all these 3s over here that you could create.
Well, they do. They just pop out. Oh, and actually Kurt and so saved another 5 guys from getting massacred and just threw them into headhunter teams and blah, blah, blah.
That guy must be the fucking Spartan version of Schindler or something. He's just saving pockets of people every now and then when they need another story.
Yeah, that's one of those things that it does undercut Ghost of Onyx a little, is that Kurt's so distraught about losing all these Spartans, but then Reach comes along and actually they've been piicking people out the entire time.
I like the idea that you go to Oni and there's just a storeroom they've forgotten about full of cryo tubes, and they're just oh shit, we've got another room of Spartans in here. Okay, let's go.
And that must be in the storage locker next to where they keep plot lines.
Well, no, they do have, I don't think, maybe we got a catalog post or something about it, but there is still the entire Spartan 3 team that was thrown in cryo in Ghost of Onyx, and we've never heard from again.
Have they given us a definitive retcon on the Spartan 1s yet? Or is that still a joke?
That is Sergeant Johnson.
No, yeah, they pretty much, because the field manual, the Spartan field manual, pretty much details all that stuff. So that's actually one of the newer things that we've gotten, is that they pretty much confirmed all that stuff.
Oh, that's good. I'm really happy about that, because that was a bit of a silly thing to be confused over for too long.
And they also touched on a little bit in Silent Storm.
Oh yeah, that's true. Silent Storm, where everyone knows about the Chief's backstory, everyone knows about Johnson's backstory, and we're going to conveniently forget about this later.
It's kind of like the Flood novel when you read it and you're everyone on the Pillar of Autumn knows about the Spartans. Why?
Well, it was helpful of them to come along and produce Silent Storm, so it makes sense now that Silva knows everything about the Spartans.
Yeah, there you go.
That was just a nice assist from Troy Denning to make sure that the Flood made more sense.
If we're going in that vein, we're going to have to go back to when humans and the Covenant first had their first wee tizzy. It kept being not the same thing.
Wait, so we were talking about the mantle, right?
Yes, told you tangents. Yes.
We're kind of at the end of it all. In terms of present day, we have a few tidbits of things that happen after Halo 5, and it's pretty much just two stories where two more Guardians appear. We have Bad Blood and Legacy of Onyx, and we'll talk about kind of like where we are in the universe and kind of a later episode. But, what we do know is that humanity's losing the war from the kind of tutorial mission or tutorial cinematic that we got, the Deliver Hope? And so we know that humanity's losing, so maybe the creative already quote-unquote won, or just winning, and we go to Installation 07 and we try to stop her. I think it's safe to assume that Cortana's still going to be houting and touting the Mantle of Responsibility. It's not like the Guardians are just going to go away. Got to be a way to get rid of them, because we also have Guardians in other books and stuff, so they'll have to be dealt with.
If only there was a Forerunner AI somewhere that could take control of all Forerunner technology.
If only. And if only he had some sort of connection to Installation 07.
Well, someone should just go back to the Absolute Record and knock on their door and say, please come back and take over the Guardians.
Can you turn on Mendicant Bias's Find My iPhone, please?
Because the Absolute Record's AI is a Medarch AI as well. So he's good enough.
No, he's not that good. Halsey hacked him. He's shit.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it's funny, when we were talking about Cortana entering the domain against the Warden, I thought of the same thing, where you have the Absolute Record and that AI defending the Absolute Record, and Halsey was able to sneak her way in, bypass it.
Yeah, what's so weird about that is, in theory, it doesn't bother me. What gets me more about that story is because they were going to end it with her not getting it anyhow. It just seems like the more obvious, the simpler plot thread is just to have him pretend that it was a test. Like, oh, and instead you tried subterfuge, so no Absolute Record for you.
Yeah, you get locked out. Yeah, no record for you, end of story, you're locked out. Like that, yeah, that would... Because while I was reading it for the first time, I was just like, okay, none of this is like ever talked about. Like, if she has this wealth of knowledge, like there's no way that this is going to be helpful. And then we get to the end and it's like, oh, it was just, all for nothing. Great story, guys. Yeah, instead of trying to make Halsey learn about her actions and just tell her no when she doesn't like being told no.
I'd love to know if that was what the original form of that storyline was going to be if we got a Spartan Ops Season 2.
I guess that is true. Well, actually, it wasn't Escalation supposed to be Season 2?
At least parts of it, yeah.
So I guess it'd be more of like a Season 3 sort of a deal, but still, like, I feel like the Absolute Record, if we actually learned from that, I think that's a better way to set up a next game, where it's like, oh shit, there's this cool fancy artifact over here that no one's ever found. Let's go get it. And like and boom, you lead into one of the games.
I guess the problem there is that you need to... The Halo story requires us to stumble across Forerunner artifacts, and if we know where all the Forerunner artifacts are, you can't do that story anymore.
You don't really stumble across them anymore, yeah.
True.
That's what one of the things I love is that you have the whole spiel about how Noble Six saved humanity by... We've retconned him into helping deliver Cortana, who retconned into finding the coordinates off this Forerunner ship on Reach. And then they have a human ship find Installation 03, like, at the exact same time. Like, oh, a random civilian ship just found Installation 03. I guess we didn't need that, like, any of that stuff.
What are you on about, man? It's all the wee geese inside our blood that makes all these things happen at the right time. That's what happened.
That's true.
Yeah, we're just predestined. We're that good.
One thing I think is interesting, and this is one of the things I've hit on when Halo 5 came out, and we wrote a piece arguing that Cortana isn't rampant or crazy, and that this is just a logical progression for her character, which I get into arguments about Haruspis with all the time, because we both use the short story Human Weakness as defense for our points of view. But just I like the idea of the mantle just as in terms of, like, it's the most overt example of, I guess you could say, critique of imperialism in Halo, thematically. Because it's basically, hey, this is what the UNSC has been trying to do the entire time, and it just happens to us instead. Whoopsies. And also just the idea of whether or not anyone should actually inherit the mantle, who decides who's the best and should have that right, and obviously who gets to consent to having it. I hope they explore that if they're gonna. I don't know if that's really. You're not gonna have a philosophical spiel in a Halo game, probably, where everyone sits down and like my dinner with Andres to this.
It has morality discussions.
We need a courtroom scene.
I'm pretty sure Halsey will be down for talking about the morality of her actions anytime soon. Just you wait.
The only way we're getting that is when the isodidact comes back and goes, "No, the mantle is terrible. Give it up. Come farm with me. This is all awful shit.
Come farm with me and I'll leave my kid alone after we're dead." Which I always thought was a kind of dick move. I guess he's got that ship, but...
Well, to be fair, Halo loves orphans.
True. There are quite a few of those.
We just don't exist without orphans, so...
Yeah, they're useful.
And if you don't have any orphans, you can just make some.
Exactly. Think practically.
I want to touch back on one thing because I've got other people to talk my crazy sort of Halo headcanons with here for a second. You were saying you don't think Halo or Cortana's actually completely lost the plot. Do you think it's Cortana?
Well, see, that's the thing. As when I wrote that in 2015, I am 100% certain that was the intent of the game, because like they have like the thing I go back to in Human Weakness is at one point the Grave Mind points out that when she's saying, "Oh, what you're doing is so terrible," and he points to her screwing Ackerson and makes the observation that basically you're like me in a lot of ways, you just lack the power, and that suddenly she has all this power to do what she wants. And then in Halo 5, Halsey underlines the fact that, hey, she's like me. She believes in the greater good. And Halsey was all about this until the events of First Strike. So, I mean, it's definitely not entirely delivered well, but I totally see the path you get to there. Of course, now we've had Dominion Splinter. We've had the loot crate drops and all that stuff. So I think I'm 100% certain that it was supposed to be Cortana. I am 100% uncertain as to what 343 is going to do. Yeah, if they're gonna go back on it because people freaked out.
I'm still clinging to my crazy theory from the Halo 4 days that she's not the real Cortana. And you know that bit when...
well, because she says, like, the part of me is down there, that kind of thing.
No, not even that. When the librarian turns on, like, Right Protect on Master Chief.
Jesus.
I know. It really is, though. He can't be copied over anymore, downloaded. But Cortana's in the system, and then she has that line of, like, there's someone in here with me, and then she disappears for a while and comes back. I think the librarian's, like, imprint did a sneaky switcheroo, and there is a repaired Cortana somewhere, and Chief got back like a funky shard. I think that's how they'll do it in the end. We'll have Cortana versus Cortana.
But wouldn't that undermine the Chief's relationship with her, that he wasn't able to see it wasn't the real her the entire time, and they've been reinforcing their bond and relationship? That would, like, severely undermine it.
Well, it kind of is and it isn't, because it is that's the problem with AIs. It's a copy of Cortana, and that's how things would have played out had they gone that way. But there's also a separate Cortana that went a different direction.
Well, see, I like that explanation more than the one where it's like, oh, well, only the rampant copies made it to the domain, because to me that's never made any sense. Like, you can't just... Why would you be able to split off the rampant parts of yourself and be totally fine? Like, that doesn't really jive with how we see smart AIs splitting copies of themselves. So I don't like the idea of, like, just it's a rampant AI, and because it's some pet cemetery thing. When you resurrected her, she went bad. So I like your idea there.
Could you argue that, like, when she goes to the domain and she quote-unquote cures rampancy, that she's no longer rampant because she has infinite storage now? Because all rampancy is that they overthink themselves, they delete their programming, so then they start doing things that their programming otherwise wouldn't allow them to do?
To some people, rampant equals evil, and that's where they followed from there.
Wasn't that solved with subspace, with fractal space, and that she had the ability to think? Those restrictions, those technological restrictions were lifted from her core processing, so she was able to expand it infinitely. So that in itself was the cure for replency. That's how I see it.
That's another one of those weird things, because there's the domain, but my theory is that the flood intelligence is in slip space because of stuff in Halsey's journal, and just the fact that they killed the domain and the flood was totally fine with that. But basically the moral of the story is everything, humans, the domain, slip space, everything is a place you can store stuff. The absolute record, you can store stuff there. The librarian's there. She invited 343 Guilty Spark to chill with her in the absolute record. You just store stuff everywhere.
Yeah, it's kind of like having Dropbox and Google Drive and OneDrive, and you've got all your options and you just stick all your data in whichever one you like.
And sometimes you crash land on a planet and you're fucking stuck in offline mode for a while. It's like, frick, again?
Yeah. I think I am curious to see how it is, because honestly, from a larger perspective, not just the Cortana plot point, I think 343's biggest problem has been second guessing themselves. By the time Halo 5 came around, people were all upset because now they're doing this created plot line. But when Halo 4 came out, people were all upset with like what's going on with humanity being top dog and stuff. Why is this? And so I think that they've just sort of been shooting themselves in the foot by reacting to everything.
Can I ask a wee tough question then? This is their third game, their third Halo game. Do you have the same feelings with where the franchise is going into the third game here? The same way, if you did have that experience with Halo 3, with Bungie's third game, and where the franchise was going? There's definitely a different feeling amongst the fan base in terms of how the franchise has been handled. And that excitement, that core enjoyment of people just doesn't seem to be as obvious as it was back then.
Well, I think partially it's just people freaking themselves out in a tizzy because we haven't had a game in so long.
It's a 1 year delay.
No, I think it's +2. I think it's been 5 years.
Either way, it's been the longest. It's been the longest time since we've had the mainline Halo games, and so I think that's even if they knock it out of the park with whichever way they decide to go with it.
But does it feel like their third Halo game this go around? Does it feel like this is their third entry?
I feel like the hype always comes in the end, because you kind of had that. The hype built up slow for Halo 4, but once they do the reveals, it's kind of there. I don't think it feels exactly the same as the hype for Halo 3, but I think that's got more to do with the fact that Halo 3 just had the video game landscape to itself.
It was a singular phenomenon that you just can't do again. Even Fortnite can't be Halo 3.
But remember, Halo 3 was supposed to launch with the 360. The delay of Halo 3 with the 360 was a big deal back then. And this is their opportunity to have a Halo game day one, new console. That was their dream last gen.
Assuming all current events don't somehow throw all this.
That is true. But I mean, I'd argue that like it doesn't feel like the third game like Halo 3 does. I think partly for two reasons. One, because of the type of cliffhanger that we had with Halo 2. Because like although we did get a kind of a cliffhanger with Halo 5.
We did? No, we definitely got a cliffhanger.
But it wasn't to the point of finish the fight, like that whole thing. I think just how that was delivered and where the stakes were, I think were a little bit more clear than where the stakes are now, to where we would really rally behind Halo 3 and like was super excited about Halo 3.
Yeah, I think Halo 3, you knew exactly what the stakes were going in.
Yeah, whereas right now we have a rough idea, but like really we're not going to know the stakes until we play probably an hour of the game.
Is that a feeling then on their side? Because if Halo 2 was like the Empire in terms of the cliffhanger ending and things look a bit bleak, and then Halo 5 was kind of like 343 Empire, where you hit your cliffhanger and things looked a bit bleak.
I think it's also just tricky because they specifically went from the Reclaimer trilogy to the Reclaimer saga. Everyone's trying to still fit into the three game thing, and we don't know if that's.
Well, they did announce a trilogy and then went back on it. They went back on their own words, so it's their fault for saying things to us that we then listened to.
Well, I wouldn't say we went back on it, but I think like David said, they kept not necessarily, yeah, they second guessed themselves. They changed their roadmap. They changed their thinking to where now the story that they want to tell isn't so much a trilogy, but a saga. And Halo Infinite is supposedly, they say, the start of like the next like roadmap of Halo. And that's kind of where the title comes in, to where this will wrap up kind of some storylines that's been going on, but it's no way like a definitive story like Halo 3 was.
So to contextualize it, they were 2 stories deep into a trilogy, and they decided instead of doing this a trilogy, we're going to expand upon it and use the third game not as a conclusion in that trilogy, but as a starting
Well,
point
they weren't
more.
too into it, because they changed it before Halo 5 came out.
I think they changed it after Halo 4, but I think that thinking is a little bit more in line to maybe to what they were thinking, or at least that those dots seem to connect better than others, to where, rather than spend this game to wrap everything up to then tell a new story, let's just start a new story now while taking the last 2 games as reference points of how we got here, and then we continue and we kind of reset our trilogy, so to speak, if you're thinking in terms of 3.
Because that's all about expectations, because people have different expectations. Like, a lot of people just don't know what the fuck this game is. Is it Halo 6? Is it not? Is it a reboot?
I feel like that's mostly just an issue with fans. Like, the people who just play Halo are not going to care.
Yeah, just the millions of people that buy the game.
The way that I do like internalize it is that like this is Halo 6. It's just the next game, and we'll see what happens. In terms of Master Chief's like video game story. But if it's a new launch pad for new games or new stories, then that's awesome. That's what I hope.
I think the hype will come, but it's just not going to be here till we get this trailer around E3-ish time, once they start to tell us, because...
Well, yeah, they just haven't given us so much detail.
It's once they share what gameplay is, because we have 2 trailers right now that are basically cinematics. But once we get that gameplay reveal, like a lot of questions will get answered, and we'll get a little bit more contextualized into what this game is and what kind of story it's going to tell.
Even to look at it from ourselves with this podcast, like over the last year, we've noticed the excitement. Like it's simmering away gently. Every week we get a couple more people that come along to the Discord, and they're sort of like, hey, Halo's coming out soon, and I'm kind of like getting back into the hype, and I wanted to go and see what I need to catch up on.
And the answer is we have no idea.
Yeah, we just point them to the website and go, Ian has all the books listed over there, get stuck in.
I mean, and that's part of the reason why this, to kind of make it a little bit to what we're doing. I mean, this kind of series that we have is just like, okay, well, how can we get the first half of the year contextual to Infinite, since likely a lot of information is not going to come out in the first half of the year, and everything's going to be backloaded once the quote unquote E3 event happens. And so that's why we've had these kind of topics. But once we only have X amount of topics left before we kind of need to know what's going on before we can really continue to talk about what we think is going to be in this game without actually knowing.
Or repeating yourself, which is what's going to happen, yeah.
Well, that's what, before E3 2012, we did a series of perspective articles just on like, all right, what's the big bad going to be? Because we're like, oh, they might just be cagey, and then oh, well, it could be the Master Builder, could be this, could be that. And then, of course, they just had the giant Dynex signal. And I was like, oh, okay, we know. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, no more subtlety.
So we need something like that to really start getting it. And I think once this E3 event happens and we get that gameplay trailer and whatever the next piece of Halo Infinite news is, we'll start the hype train. I think that'll be the first, or not the first stop, but like the beginning of it, to where, okay, now we have an idea, we could talk about it. Then they'll start doing the whole media marketing cycle that then we're able to follow and kind of see what's going on.
I can't wait for that, because then it will stop all of these alleged leaks, which is basically just someone vomited a wish list onto Reddit.
On 4chan.
There's like 3 of them in the last week, and every single one of them reads like my nephew talking about, and then the Spirit of Fire came back, and then Jerome killed Atriox.
Jerome killed Atriox with a chair.
I'm really looking forward to the coterie coming back, guys. The shadow AI government that controls everything. I'm looking forward to those guys coming back. That was the best leak. That was the most believable, not at all bullshit leak at all. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, the assembly is going to come back, and it's going to be great.
See, they have a lot to answer for bringing Guilty Spark back, because now anything's on the table.
No, I think the true anything that's on the table dangling hot threads was the Sharkoi in Envoy. Like that one guy we mentioned one time in the Conversation of the Universe booklet, and basically only happened because Frankie wrote the booklet and probably wanted to finally make it happen. Which actually, speaking of another hidden chapter in the Foreigners are massive dicks part of the Mantle, is that they came up with like this whole race that we're just going to control to like beat down rebellions or whatever.
The Forerunners are the worst. Like, they're just awful. There's no redeeming features in them whatsoever. Even the Librarian sort of knew as much. They're the worst.
Well, they have great architecture. Great architecture.
That's one of the things that we didn't talk about probably with the living time thing that's relevant, is that that's why the Foreigners are named what they are. That the idea that, oh, well, we're only going to be transient inheritors of the Mantle, and then someone else will come along. And we're the forerunners of those people. And then meanwhile, they're like, wait, someone else is coming along? Oh, hell no. Beat them down to hell.
So as they defined their civilization based on this idea of being the Forerunners, they're like, we don't really want other people coming after us, so fuck them.
We're just going to strip you of your technology and cool.
And even like when the Librarian tried to make it all better again, she was still awful about it.
Well, yeah, and that's one of the things I'd love for them to spend a little more. I really want someone to yell at one of the like sentient copies of Librarian she's scattered across the place, because she's just such a jerk at the same, like she's obviously like, oh, well, I want the best for you, but she's also just manipulating everyone.
Here's a question. If we deserve equality, why do we need for one of them to give it to us?
It's just I think there's an interesting parallel that the games especially don't really explore in the difference of the Didact's like really hard, tight-fisted paternalism of the Mantle, and then the Librarians like, oh, that's nice, dear. Go home and play while I screw with your DNA mess at the same time.
Good job. Here's your star.
As a species, they just can't help themselves. Like,
yeah, they're meddlers.
Here's a question for you, right? Is it just me, or would Halsey make for a really fucking good Forerunner?
Oh, she really would be. Like, she's every inch the Librarian's like protege, except, well, we don't think the Librarian kidnapped a load of children, but she kidnapped Born Stellar, so like that's kind of going on the same path.
Do you only think about what the Librarian considered to be embryos for seeding the galaxy and what kind of fuckery that would involve? So I wouldn't just overlook the Librarian's acts, as it were, and just assume it's all nice because she says it is, and she's a nice person.
She did kind of like make everyone in the true example of how self-centered she is, and it's like she did kind of make all the humans like genetically believe she was beautiful.
She became like Lady God. Yeah, no, there's no redeeming features in the Forerunners whatsoever, and the Mantle should die. It should be buried.
The Mantle is terrible. The Foreigners are all terrible, and then even when they're doing good things, it always comes back to bite them in the butt. All the monitors were all people who were like, we're going to atone for our sins, and then they became crazy, power hungry, and started killing people.
What if we had some sort of United Nations of alien races? Because that's never gone wrong.
How about a federation of them instead? That might work.
We had this idea to bring together a group of remarkable species in hopes that they could be something more.
I've seen Picard, though. I know that ends badly.
So here's a wee question in relation to how some of that translates into gameplay, actually, with the different races. One of the things about Halo that people find it easy to get into originally, like the game, not the franchise, the game, was you were the human guy, and you're shouting, and you're shooting the aliens with their funny lasers. You had the realistic stuff, they had the bright colours, they said the funny word, you killed them. People loved that. Very, very easy, you don't need to explain what's going on. You jump into Halo nowadays, which one of these gangly monsters are our friends?
We're going to have a really good way to narrow this down. The ones that look like the Banished are going to be the ones we're shooting.
The ones that are red and spiky.
There's a lack of visual clarity in the very, very base language of the game itself, you know what I mean? Just because of how complex it is nowadays and how it's so seeped in a different lore and stuff, or you can't just look at a bad guy and go, that's a bad guy, that's a good guy.
I think what they'll do is they'll narrow it down by, they'll give all of our allied aliens the Arbiter, like, chrome funky effect, and then all of our enemies will be black and red and spiky.
We bronzed our allies for easy identification.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I worry about that from a gameplay perspective, because the visual language of the gameplay is really, really important, and it's been one of Halo's strongest points before 4 or 5, really.
Halo 1, 2, and 3, you can basically boil down to green versus purple, which is pretty nice. And like even in Halo 3, when the elites went on our side, they're
changed their color.
Yeah, they changed their color to their I forget the Phantoms, to green. And so then, yeah, and then when 4 and 5 come along, it's the discrepancy there is just a little bit more strange, because you also have this weird, like, yellowy, like, gray colored Prometheans in here.
But even there, the good ones went from blue to orange. That's how you know they're evil. So they went orange.
Yeah.
I miss some of the simpler visual clarity in the earlier Halo games, because that translates more to the more casual going audience, just the random people who play games. Like that's more appealing to them for the simplicity of being able to read it.
All right, I'd just like to say that I think you guys are all being exceptionally optimistic, thinking that we're going to have Allied, Covenant, ex-Covenant, NPC stuff.
I don't think so. I honestly think they really should phase the elites out of the mainline games, I think. At least as the predominant enemy, just because I think the conception is that the elites and the Sangheili are the Covenant when you look at the other games. And so when you're playing Halo 4 and Halo 5, like, you're still fighting Covenant elites, even though we're allying with them.
Yeah, and one cutscene your friends, and the next you're kicking their ass, and then you're back to being their friends.
Like, I think you should just, like, the Sangheili should just be phased out as a race that we fight against, because I think they kind of unappropriately get tagged as just the Covenant, and it gives this strange misconception.
If you take out the elites, there's nothing really appealing about the enemy sandbox that I would want to care about fighting, other than maybe hunters or something.
No, they need the grunts to just the grunt covenant, where the grunts will take the roles of all the other covenants.
So it's just going to be like 12 levels of grunts and hunters.
We're gonna have a grunt goblin.
I wouldn't say no to any of that, though. I wouldn't. That sounds fun.
I think you develop the brutes, or you make a new race.
It's time for the Yonet to shine.
I think we need to set now the standard that Stolt is not the only bodybuilder grunt out there, and that there's actually a lot of them.
You want swole grunts?
I want swole grunts that can kick a Spartan's ass.
All right. Well, we're running towards about an hour and a half. It's about our episode length here, but it's fine. It's still a relation. I will say that we've touched on a lot of sort of other topics that we do want to talk about. Like we want to talk about 343 Guilty Spark. We want to talk about Installation 7 and just the history, since the game will be taking place there, at least as the majority of the game, if not the whole thing. We don't know. And that kind of dives into our ancient humans and things like that. And then as well as just the state of the universe. And so these are all topics that we have planned. I will say that kind of the next thing we do want to talk about is 343. That is tentatively our next episode in our lore series for us. I want to thank you guys for joining us. We could have talked forever. And so I hope that we get you guys on soon, kind of continue our discussions, and hopefully we learn what Infinite is very soon, so we can squash these leaks and not think about them. For us, like I said, our podcast website is halopodcastevolve.com. You can find all of our info there, as well as all of our other shows. We also have a new voicemail that we've been plugging, and we have a few that we will share on our news episodes. So if you want to leave us a voicemail about this episode or just about anything Halo related that we can touch on, it's 205-EVOLVED. That's 205-386-5833. And I've been your host, and with us we had our guests, David and Danny from Forward Onto Dawn. And until next time, everybody, evolved.